we're Speak Out Socialists, and we're here today because many of us are rightfully concerned about what the period ahead holds. Regardless of the candidate elected, we would have had to get organized anyway. But with the results of this election, we face new challenges and the possibility of a larger response from both our side and theirs. As revolutionary socialists, we and Speak Out know that capitalism is a system that breeds death and despair. It is a system that is based on the exploitation of working people here and around the world. Those in power attempt to divide us along the lines they have maintained. And these divisions often subjugate people of color, women, immigrants, queer folks, and others to discrimination and open attacks. Real change will not come from politicians who manage the system in the interest of those who are really in power. The change we need comes from people like us coming together to defend our interests and challenge the system. We do not have confidence in the politicians of the Democratic or Republican Party. We do have confidence in the power that working people can wield when they get organized for their own interests, and ultimately have the power to reorganize society and bring a different social order into being, a socialist society. As has been said, we are not outnumbered, we are out-organized. Today, we're taking a step to change that. First, we'll hear from John, who will discuss how we got here, and then myself. I'll share some thoughts about what we can do to start to get organized, and this will be about 20 minutes. We'll then transition to a larger group discussion to talk through takeaways, about 20 to 30 minutes, and then into smaller breakout groups, again, about 20 to 30 minutes, to discuss what organizing we can do around us and what that means for the long term. And last, but certainly not least, we'll do a group share out. So please stay after the presentations for a group discussion. I think this is the best part. If you're not already connected, please make sure to sign our contact list, so right over there, and talk to someone in a Speak Out shirt. We need to get organized, and we can start by connecting with each other. And please make sure to check out the table again, because we have literature over there, posters, buttons, t-shirts, and other organizing tools as well. All right, so with that, I'll pass it over to John, who will begin the presentation.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay? Wonderful. Thank you. Well, yeah, thank you all for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. Their elections are finally over. Oh. This was the most expensive election in history, spending about $16 billion in total between the two candidates and parties. In 2020, it was around $15 billion. The vast majority of that money came from the biggest banks and corporations and wealthy donors. These two candidates were selected and funded by the super rich to run their system in their interests. This is their so-called democracy that needed saving. And now, with the second election of Trump, many people have again been hit by a feeling of shock and fear and outrage, feeling like the rug's been ripped out from underneath them, nervous for what's to come. Again, Trump's campaign represented some of the most racist and reactionary views openly expressed by a candidate for president. From his vile racism towards immigrants and Palestinians, his threats of mass deportations, his constant dehumanizing of LGBTQ+ people, his promises of repression against protests, his threats to reproductive health care, his blatant promises to the super rich, and his sexist attitudes towards women. Trump is eager to bring his brand of chaos and division in order to sow further divisions within the population and to aggressively serve the interest of US capitalism and its dominance around the world. However, much this election was less a vote for Trump. It was even more a vote against the Democrats, and even a recognition that both parties don't represent our interests. Trump got roughly about the same number of votes as in 2020, but Harris got 8 million fewer votes than Biden in 2020. And more people did not vote at all for president, than the number of people who voted for either candidate. About 30%, 36% of eligible voters, or about 81 million people, chose not to vote for a president, which is more people than who voted for Trump or Harris. In other words, most people chose none of the above. This is an acknowledgement that these parties don't represent our interests, and many people don't see the elections offering much meaningful change in their lives. And there is no way to paint all of Trump voters as some monolith. Many wish to dismiss anyone who voted for Trump as a racist and a supporter of everything he stands for. But this is not true. And thinking like this just serves to sow further divisions. Even billboards in swing states openly said, you don't have to like Trump to vote for him. Trump won in several states where voters passed legislation to protect abortion rights. In Alaska and Missouri, both states Trump won, voters approved minimum wage increases to $15 per hour. Also in Alaska, Missouri, and in Nebraska, another state won by Trump, voters improved workers' ability to earn paid sick leave. It's clear that the economy was on the mind of many voters. And when working people had a chance to vote to improve their lives in specific ways, they did. These are not voters who agree with everything Trump stands for. According to exit polls, the Democrats lost the most votes among workers who said the economy was the #1 issue for them, and among voters who said they are worse off than they were 4 years ago. But 22% of voters said inflation has caused them severe hardship over the last year, and they voted for Trump by 50 points. Democrats only gained votes from 2020 among voters who said they were better off and have a household income of more than $200,000 per year. This should not be surprising at all. The Democrats had nothing to say to working people whose lives have been made more difficult in the last 4 years. For all of the blatant lies and distortions of reality that Trump is known to say all of the time, there is one truth that he would hammer on over and over: that you are getting screwed over in this society, that the elites do not care about you. Of course, we need to be extremely clear among ourselves that his explications for how and why this was happening are total nonsense, blaming immigrants, the LGBTQ community, and any other scapegoat he could think of. But for many people who are struggling in this society, the recognition of their suffering, even if distorted, earned a figure like Trump a level of credibility in contrast to the Democrats, who essentially told the public that their problems weren't that bad and that the economy is fixed, while the Democrats told us they brought down the inflation rate, and Harris said that Bidenomics is working, people paid more for basic necessities. But the actual prices are still way higher than they were in 2019. Housing costs have increased by about 54%, energy costs around 61%, food about 25%, and health insurance about 22%. This means that the average household debt has continued to increase and is at an all-time high today. And Democrats want credit for the unemployment numbers being down, when the vast majority of new jobs that have been recovered have been part-time and low wage, where workers often had to work 2 jobs just to get by. In big cities, workers look around and see their communities still devastated, with abandoned buildings and record numbers of unhoused people who can't afford to live. The largest category of newly homeless people living in the streets is people older than the age of 65, whose Social Security payments are often less than the cost of monthly rent. And we see whole communities ripped apart from drug overdoses. In city after city, Democratic mayors oversee police departments that continue to kill Black people at alarming rates. The Democrats had nothing to say about any of this, nothing that spoke to the crises of people's lives. Strategically, Trump would at least acknowledge some of these problems and said things that he would get rid of taxes and on tips and overtime. Some people who are struggling felt at least seen by Trump, and this helps explain why Trump got more votes from Black and Latino working class men. The Democrats have been in office 12 of the last 16 years. They have been the overseers of the system as it tore working people's lives apart during the Obama years, when his administration was giving trillions of dollars to the banks as working class families were losing their jobs and their homes, and while the government was increasing military spending and slashing budgets for social services. In 2020, the Democrats were elected when the economy was hit hard by the pandemic. And they were elected making huge promises, but they've delivered next to nothing. The Democrats promised to protect workers' rights, but they intervened to block railroad workers from going on strike and helped impose a contract that benefited the railroad companies. They campaigned criticizing Trump's anti-immigration policies, but once they got into office, they continued most of those policies, arresting and deporting a record number of migrants at the border. They said climate change was an existential threat. It needed to be addressed. But once in power, they gave out a record number of drilling permits on federal land to drilling companies and brought US oil production to a new record high. And they passed record military budgets as they slashed spending on social services like food assistance and childcare services for the poor. In just 1 year, they've given over $20 billion to support Israel's genocidal slaughter of Palestinians, the bombing of Lebanon, and a wider war in the Middle East. It is no wonder that this election was the worst showing for Democrats among Arab and Muslim voters. How could they vote for a candidate that supported genocide? Many people have been asking, why was the Democratic Party and the Harris campaign seemingly committed to alienating their so-called base and losing this election? Well, the answer is simple. All of us, working class people, immigrants, people of color, LGBTQ plus people, are not their base. We never have been. The base of the Democratic Party, its real base, is the same as that of the Republican Party. They sit on corporate boards together, send their children to the same elite schools together, and profit from war and immiseration together. The Democrats and the Republicans both oversee the system. They both represent the wealthy class of people and their corporations. They have no solutions to the problems we face. But Trump represents the system with the mask ripped off. He wears his hatred of immigrants and Palestinians like a badge of honor. He flaunts his hatred of LGBTQ plus people and denigrates women. We know there will be an acceleration and expansion of the sorts of attacks we've already seen from Trump and the Republicans. The first time Trump was in office, there were some people in his administration who disagreed with him, who actively tried to challenge and stop some of his policies. This time, it's looking like there will likely be none of those people, and there has been much more preparation. This will be an administration that could carry out much more sweeping attacks from the population. Just by looking at Trump's cabinet picks, it's clear that there will be a barrage of attacks on many people within the population. For example, the proposed Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Stephen Miller, was behind the previous Trump administration's child separation policy, Muslim ban, and anti-refugee measures. He is an open promoter of the white supremacist Great Replacement theory. When the proposed border czar, Tom Homan, was asked about parents being separated from their children who were US citizens, he simply replied, families can be deported together. For the newly proposed Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, none other than the richest man in the world and promoter of misinformation, Elon Musk, is proposed to head along with Vivek Ramaswamy. It is very likely that there will be mass layoffs of public workers. For Secretary of Defense, Trump will nominate Pete Hegseth, who defended US soldiers who were accused and on trial for war crimes and the killing of civilians. In the face of all of these attacks in front of us, we can expect the Democrats to do exactly what they did during the last Trump administration. They will be there to push people to throw all of their energy into getting them reelected. Anytime movements may spring up, the Democrats will be there to encourage them and then channel them out of the streets and into the ballot box. We can't fall for this again. And there is a real threat from a growing far-right wing in this country. This will only be encouraged under Trump. This right wing includes armed militia groups that attack protests and LGBTQ people and immigrants. These groups cannot be stopped by voting either. They spring from the same conditions from a system in crisis that has nothing to offer people. This will only be confronted by the organizing power of working class people. Now is the time we can begin to look to ourselves, connect with each other, and collectively resist the forces that are arrayed against us. So where do we go from here?
And that's where I pick up. So while the future may seem daunting, the challenges we face today, from political division to attacks on our basic rights, are not problems we can face individually. While we may feel atomized by the society, we cannot fight the battles that are coming alone. And the presence of each of us in this room show that there are people out there who refuse to accept this new reality, although acknowledging that our current reality isn't really working for us either. We need massive changes, but we have to start where we are. The first step is breaking down the isolation and powerlessness that this society makes us feel. We need to listen to the people around us. What are their fears? What are their hopes? The fear that this moment is bringing is very real, but fear can be overcome when we begin to see that there are possibilities of confronting what is coming. And if the elections show us anything, it is less that people increase their support for Trump and the Republicans, and more that millions of people didn't want the business as usual that the Democrats had to offer. So what are the actual changes that people around us want to see? We don't have to settle for what those in power are ready and willing to give us. We should be talking to family, friends, coworkers, the cashier at our grocery stores. We need to remind each other at every opportunity that we are not alone, that there are others who care about the same things we do. We can make spaces for the people around us to share their concerns, hopes, and fears by holding meetings at our homes, in the break room at work, at school, or in a coffee shop. This is a moment when we all need to be organizers. And the first step is just starting the conversation. This should be our goal now. In the past, we, Speak Out, have been part of organizing against cuts to education, building demonstration against wars, and raising awareness for issues like the destruction of our environment. We are developing basic organizing tools like flyers, leaflets, buttons, and stickers that can flag what you stand for and spark those important conversations. Some of these tools are available today, and you can find them at the table over there. But we need to discuss what other tools we need, and enlist the talent of artists we know to develop them. We can also organize things that involve people we don't know yet, like speak outs, banner drops, or putting up posters for others to see. We can start in small groups and invite more people to take part in these small actions together. We can also go to demonstrations with others. And we should make sure not to ignore those who don't seem ready to act now. Many workers face long hours, commutes, and family obligations. Many never have been active before. But without them, our power is greatly limited. We have to include working people in every way we can because working people run the society. And when a movement begins, and hopefully it will, workers will have a place in it. So when we flex our organizing muscles in these various ways, it allows us to gain the experience and confidence to draw more people in. Our task is to strengthen the circles around us, to build organizations that are capable of involving people in the many struggles in front of us, whether against the various immediate attacks we can expect, such as ICE raids, abortion bans, attacks on our rights to protest. The list goes on. We need to organize in our community so that we are capable of standing up against rent increases and evictions. We need to build networks in our workplaces that are capable of bringing people together to stand against the attacks on our standard of living and the erosion of our working conditions. We need radical alternatives that can actually lead to improvement in people's lives and motivate those around us to stand up for themselves collectively. The alternative Trump has presented with us sounds radical, but only offers scapegoats, division, and a further deterioration of our lives. While we have no way to foresee what lies ahead of us, we can likely expect more attempts to divide us and pit us against each other. There will probably be more repression, and resistance will become increasingly criminalized. While both Republicans and Democrats are responsible for the situation we find ourselves in, it's true that Trump's methods are more dramatic and frightening. But at the end of the day, we have to be confident that the majority of people in this country don't actually want their lives to be motivated and dominated by fear. When we see clearly what our possibilities are and depend on ourselves, the slogan from the late 1960s, "Be realistic, demand the impossible," won't seem like a dream. What we do today really can have an impact, and we look forward to our discussion and taking these steps together.